friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Megan and today I'm going to be sharing all the books that I read in March. So unlike I previously thought I was going to, I did not finish my March TBR. I made it most of the way through, but I did not read House of Dragons or finish Send Me Their Souls. I made it about halfway to 3/4 through Send Me Their Souls, but I did not finish that nor House of Dragons. So those will be moving to my April TBR. So yes. I'm just gonna start with the things I reread to get through those. First was Ruin and Rising. As you all know, I read this for the Grishaverse read-along I've been hosting since January, February, one of those months. I finished Ruin and Rising, which is the final book of the Shadow and Bone trilogy and the first installment of the Grishaverse. I will say that I did not hate the ending as much this time, but I still found the book very, very slow. I was able to come to terms with and accept the ending more this time, I think because I was expecting it this time, but it still wasn't my favorite ending. Next, I reread Illuminae by Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is best read in a physical / audiobook format so that you get the full immersive experience, which is what I did. And I loved it just as much as the first time. I'm very excited to read the next two books of the trilogy and also the short story companion called Memento. But this is essentially the story of Katie Grant, who is a hacker, and Ezra Mason, who is kind of a jockey buff guy. And they were dating and broke up on the same day that the bad people I'm forgetting the name of right now attacked their home planet of Carenza. And so they fled and got separated onto 2 different ships because Ezra had to go on the medical ship due to an injury, and Katie got sent to just like the normal ship. And Katie ends up like hacking the system and discovering secrets, and the AI is somewhat sentient and somewhat morally gray, and it was just a really fantastic read, so I'm excited to see what other stories can be told in this world. And finally, of my rereads, I reread A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, somewhat set in the real world, and somewhat set in a fantasy world. And our main character, Harper, has cerebral palsy, which is some nice representation there. I will say that I think I enjoyed it more this time around. Still kind of slow, still not my absolute favorite book, but it was a little more enjoyable this time around. And then speaking of A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I did read the sequel, A Heart So Fierce and Broken, and we are following Gray and Liamara more in this novel than we were in A Curse So Dark and Lonely. Liamara is actually a brand new character introduced in this novel. I thought it was somewhat enjoyable, but it was really hard to honestly pay attention to. I kept getting really distracted and not invested until almost 3/4 of the way through until I was really invested. And also I don't like the way that the characters from the first novel were portrayed from this perspective. I think it really diminished the character arc that they had in the first novel, but that's just my personal opinion. And then also speaking of the Grishaverse, I did finish The Lives of Saints, which is a short story bind-up of, you guessed it, the lives of the saints. So each character only has like a couple pages to their own story. So it was a really fast-paced and quick read, which is nice. I could pick it up kind of whenever I had a little bit of free time, read a few pages, and I was pretty much a chapter down. So it was definitely a quick, fast-paced read, and the stories were pretty detailed and investing, so I was pretty entertained throughout the whole thing. But yes, that is The Lives of Saints. Oh, and I redact my statement. You do not need to finish Shadow and Bone trilogy before reading this like I originally thought, because it talks about Alina at the end, and I thought it was going to give away the ending of Ruin and Rising, but it just tells a completely different story of Alina, so it's totally okay to read this before. Next, I read An American Marriage by Tiari Jones, and this is an adult fiction novel of, what is her name? Celestial and Roy, and they are a married couple. However, one day Roy is wrongfully accused of sexual assault and is imprisoned, and during his time in prison, Celestial gets really tired of being the prison wife, so she ends up somewhat separating but not actually divorcing Roy and falling for her best friend in the meantime. And then when Roy is let free from prison, it comes to the final standoff where Roy has to deal with the fact that his wife is in love with another man after just finally getting out of prison. And it was a powerful read, and yeah, I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. Still not my like absolute favorite, but it was a really good story. And then finally I read The Girl the Sea Gave Back by Adrienne Young. This is the somewhat sequel slash somewhat companion novel to Sky in the Deep, in which we are following more of Halvard, I think his name is. He is the younger brother of Fisk from Sky in the Deep, and it is his and Tova's novel. Tova is a like future seer slash oracle-esque type of person, and is taken in by her enemies after she was sacrificed to the gods. She ended up living and was taken in by the enemies and used as kind of a weapon of sorts. And Halvard and her are put against one another but end up falling in love, of course. And it was cute, but I definitely preferred Sky in the Deep. Next I read Stranger Things: The Other Side, which is the story of the Stranger Things season 1, but from Will's perspective. So it was really interesting to see what he went through when we were only seeing kind of the third person perspective, and also seeing more about the underworld, or the upside down rather. So this was a fun little graphic novel. And then of course I read volumes 11 through 15 of Fruits Basket, and continuing my Fruits Basket journey as always. If you don't know, I've said it a bajillion times on my channel at this point, but Fruits Basket follows Toru Honda, who is taken in by her classmates who are vengeful or possessed by vengeful Chinese zodiac spirits. And if that doesn't entice you to read the manga, I don't know what will. Next I read Felix Ever After, which is the story of Felix, who is a trans black queer man, and he is going to art school and is currently on kind of a college hunt, and is up against one of his classmates to win a scholarship to attend a like really prestigious art school that not a lot of people can get into, and Felix himself cannot get into it without the scholarship. So he is on this mission to beat out the opponent. However, one day his dead name and pictures are revealed in an art gallery, and Felix is on the hunt to figure out who did it, and automatically assumes it was his opponent, and it evolves into a catfishing, into a lovers, into just friends-esque element, and Felix just wants to be loved. So it's really his story about finding love, even though he feels like he can't be loved because he fits too many minorities, or he's marginalized too much that he'll never be loved. It's his story about finding it anyways. Very, very, very cute. I liked this one a lot. Next I read Do Nothing by Celeste Headley. This was a nonfiction audiobook I read, and it really talks about the importance of having a hobby for the sake of a hobby, and it doesn't have to be a side gig, and having that rest time and not like working yourself to the bone, and just relaxing sometimes, and like intentional relaxing. So I really liked that novel. I read through it right away and recommended it to like all my coworkers, so I recommend it to you as well. Next I read Find Me Their Bones by Sarah Wolfe, which is the sequel to Bring Me Their Hearts, in which we are following Zara, who is a heartless, which is essentially like the body slave of a witch, in that their heart is owned by the witch and they can be commanded, and if they're killed they come back to life, that sort of thing. And Zara, all she wants is her heart back so that she can be human again, and the witches have offered her the chance to get her heart back if she steals the prince's heart, and not just like hypothetically, like literally steals his heart. This is the sequel to that, and we are learning more about like the dragons of this world, or rather worms of this world, so it was a really fun read. Next I read You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, in which we are following Liz Lighty, and she is, apparently I'm on like a scholarship kick because Liz is also competing for a scholarship, and the way to do this is to become prom queen. However, she is just a lowly clarinetist. No one will ever vote for her, so she just like remakes her personality and like kind of tampers herself down so that she fits the narrative of what a prom queen is. So it's the story about like being your true self. She also falls in love with one of her fellow prom queen contestants, which is really fun. My only complaint with this book, I loved everything else, but my one complaint is that it does have a little touch of I'm not like other girls, which is my least favorite trope of all time, so that made me cringe a little bit. I think it was redacted a tiny bit, and she had a bit of a character arc, but there was still one character who she was like, oh, she's blonde and pretty, so she has no like motive or personality or anything beyond just being mean and popular. So yeah. Next I went on a bit of a Tiffany D. Jackson kick and read Monday's Not Coming and Grown. Monday's Not Coming is the story of a girl who returns from her aunt's house and finds that Monday, her best friend, is missing and no one seems to notice and or care. It has a bit of a unreliable narrator element and murder mystery element, and it's just so good, and I don't want to say anything else without spoiling it, so I highly recommend you read Monday's Not Coming. And then alongside that was Grown, and this is the story of, oh gosh, Enchanted Jones, who initially it's told in like a multi-perspective or time frame format, in like present day and then the past leading up to present day, in which we are following Enchanted, who has been accused of murdering sensation pop star slash R&B king Corey Fields, and is like being wrongfully accused of his murder, and she doesn't know, like she woke up and doesn't know how he got murdered. But leading up to that, we're following her journey in becoming Corey Fields' protege, but it like strong trigger warnings for like grooming and sexual slash mental slash physical abuse slash just abuse in general, victim blaming, murder, like all the 9 yards. Please be careful going into this book. Also this one, they're just heavy trigger warnings for both. I don't know if I've touched on all of them, so please check reviews on these before going into them if you're sensitive to those types of topics. And final and favorite book of March was Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. Holy cow, this book was incredible. It is a Black Girl Magic King Arthur retelling, and it is chef's kiss. It is so good, you guys. It did not take the route I expected at all, and I don't want to say anything further. Just please read this book. It was incredible. But that was my March books I read. I thought I was in a bit of a slump last month. Like, I did not feel like I was reading nearly as much as normal, but I still read 22 books, so I think I still did really good for the month. I just felt like I was like really slumpy for whatever reason. But yeah, that was my March TBR, so let me know what you guys read in March, and I'll check in with you in my next video. Bye, friends.